Hello, Facebook and YouTube, all my Facebook friends, everyone from our Ontario Landlords Watch group, our new friends, our new members. This is something that I like to do as much as I possibly can, from getting on Facebook Live and YouTube and be able to bring a landlord to you, bring an elected official, or bring a product or a service that could really help you manage your rental units. Tonight, I have Darrell Steele with me. He is a landlord in Ontario. We have been going back and forth through the group and understanding the issues with the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board, and we're definitely, our thoughts are aligned, and I thought that it would be a perfect opportunity to come on tonight, and hopefully we don't have any freezing or crappy noises like it did last time. If so, I am discontinuing my membership with StreamYard. Darrell, thank you so much for coming on tonight and being able to talk about you being a landlord in Ontario. About how did you get started? Tell us a little bit about you first before we really get into the nitty gritty of the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board.
Well, thanks for having me, Kayla. First, let me say I love the Facebook page. It's been a tremendous resource for me, learning through other landlords, and not only just landlords, but people with skills and trades. It's such a diverse group, and the bounty of knowledge that they bring to us to help us, because really there's nothing out there, is so wonderful. So thank you for doing that. I grew up in the Ottawa Valley, Petawawa. My dad was military. I served in the military. I still am. I was a military pilot for 25 years, flew transport out of Trenton. About 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with a near fatal illness and it looked like I might be released from the military. So I said, well, I better have a plan B here. So I thought, I have a business degree from Laurentian University, a Bachelor of Commerce anyways. So I thought, well, I'll pick up some rental properties, and that maybe become plan B if I do get released from the military. Well, fortunate for me, I was cured from the illness. Everything's fine. But now I have 7 rental properties. So I have a full-time job in the military, which, wasn't necessarily expected at the time, but I'll take it because it's a wonderful job and a great group of people. But now I'm balancing that career with 7 rental properties. So my plate's pretty full at times. So I have 3 properties in Belleville and 2 properties in Belleville. I used to have 3, and 3 in Trenton. I have 2 duplexes. So I have 7 doors, basically, as you like to say. I recently sold a property in Belleville. I think that was a bit of a turning point for me. I think I got a little bit frustrated with the industry. I went through a bad tenant experience, not on that property, but the current tenants that were in that property were wonderful long-term tenants, a young family. They had finally stabilized themselves employment-wise, credit-wise, and were capable of getting a mortgage. They asked me to buy if they could purchase the house. She wanted to open up a hair salon in the house. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to let this family have this home. They've been really good to me. So we worked out a price, probably below market value, but I didn't have to deal with a realtor. I didn't have to deal with any significant inspections. They were well aware of the property, so it worked out. So yeah, I was really happy to do that. And it was a bit of a relief to unload that property. It's kind of, when you load shed, it's kind of like one of your kids finally goes off and starts their life, right? Well, whew. I'm still happy with the properties I have, but it worked. That situation worked out quite well.
Same thing with us. My husband's like, oh, we're gonna put an offer and on this property. I'm like, we have another child coming to us. This is great. Okay, we can take care of them.
Yeah. Exactly. Life goes on, right? But I mean, the rental properties are always there. So you always have to consider them in your life decisions and how your life unfolds, for sure. For us, they become a bit of a, you're landlocked, so to speak, to use a Navy term, because you can't really move away from the area unless you want to hire a property management group, right? So I'm planning retirement from the military in March. Currently, I'm at the search and rescue unit. But in March, so I'll have more time to commit to the properties and to pursue those goals. So.
Perfect. Now with COVID, this is the #1 question that we have our landlords is like, how are you dealing through COVID? Are your tenants, most of them are great? Do you have anyone that's trying to, take advantage of the situation? What are you experiencing now?
Well, I kind of have the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So actually, I don't have too many bad. I got the good and the ugly. So I have, out of the 7 units that I have, 6 units are paying their rent, not necessarily exactly on time. but they always let me know how much they're going to be able to afford, on the first of the month, and they'll say in 2 weeks I'll have the additional like $300 or $600 for you. And for the most part, they've done that. So I've been pretty happy. And the great tenants that I got, I really like them. I mean, they're wonderful folks. I have 2 single moms with kids who are so happy to have a nice home to live in at a fair rental price. I was lucky when I bought my properties because it was before the boom in housing and the cost that has gone up to buy a house. But most of my properties were under the 150K mark, which is pretty good. So that leaves me a lot of flexibility in my rents, what I can charge and what I don't have to be on the high end of the market for rental charging. If I like somebody, if you pose to me as a good person and that, then I'm going to give you a pretty reasonable rent, and they're pretty happy about that. I got a young man as a tenant. He said no one would rent to him. He works at Walmart. He cleans in the evenings at Walmart. He just wanted a quiet place that he could sleep in the day, ride his mountain bike, and go to work. And he is so grateful that I gave him an apartment, and I'm happy too. And it's worked out. It was a risk. I was like, young guy, I'm not so sure, right? And then, it's been really good. So overall, of my 7 units, 6 are fully paid. So that is a blessing. But I do have 1 unit, unfortunately, that basically hasn't paid since January. So they were on OW. The check didn't arrive one day, and it's smoke and mirrors when you call the OW office, right? You don't get a straight answer because of the privacy issues, which I fully don't understand because this is public money. But again, what are you going to do, right? So it turns out could have been some fraud situation going on with the tenant. They were deemed no longer eligible for a housing allowance. So I started the N4 eviction process, and then COVID hit. Moratorium or ban on evictions, and they've been living in my place paying basically rent-free since January. So the current arrears are over almost $9,000. So that's pretty significant.
Have you the link with them of your local area? It's probably called a homeless prevention program, in where that if the tenants do fall into arrears, they can go there, they can do an intake, and then potentially get funds issued to the landlord in order to keep them in their home. Or are they just no contact whatsoever with you right now?
No, they're in contact. The wife is in contact. The husband, I haven't seen him in quite a while. But I've gone to every agency I can think of and have received no relief. I've gone to the federal government, which I didn't expect much. They panned it off to the provincial government. I've talked to my local MP. I've written emails to the housing minister. Got a very generic response on what to do. Basically, go to the LTB. But are you kidding me? You've closed them, right? So I've gone to the city asking for help from the city because not recently the mayor of Belleville came out coming down hard on a commercial landlord who was playing hardball on a tenant. So I'm like, well, this seems like a good opportunity to approach the mayor to see if I can get help, because apparently this is supposed to be a community effort, right, during this pandemic. So I approached the mayor asking if I could have any funds from the city to help house this family, because the expectation that a private citizen should house another private citizen, it doesn't exist. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, the assumptions where that money is supposed to come from, like, are we just, I mean, fortunately I can afford it, but if you can't, I mean, where are these landlords supposed to come up with this money? So basically I asked to have my property taxes foregone. I said, basically you turn me into social housing. It's emergency shelter is what I'm providing. So can you forego the property taxes? And we got wrapped up in some municipality act where they couldn't provide funding. Now the mayor's been really good, to be honest. The mayor is the only significant member or provincial, or not provincial, but member of elected official who's reached out to me personally and thanked me for what I've done, but to say his hands are tied. Now I have gone to Hastings Housing, which is the equivalent of what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. And they only accept applications from tenants. So I've talked to the tenant. Have you talked to Hastings Housing? Are you going to try and get some funding? And she gives me some vague answer, which I'm not sure is accurate or true. And they can't help me. And in fact, Hastings Housing kind of pointed the finger at me. Well, no one forced you to rent to somebody on OW. That's the response I got. That's from a social office, a social assistance office, basically blaming me that they got cut off.
Now, this is my next question for you. So there's a lot of posts in our group lately about, they've been contacted by the region of wherever they are to say that there is this program to guarantee the rent. It also gives you certain type of relief when it comes down to maintenance beyond the wear and tear, but they don't talk about like a dollar amount to it. And then the other side is that they offer a mediator to come in and mediate just in case the communication breaks down between the landlord and the tenant. What would your thought be on that type of program, knowing that you really don't know if the rent is guaranteed? What kind of dollar amount are we really looking at for the actual damages that they say that they're going to cover? And do you think a mediator actually is a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's a lot to digest. Is this for like ODSP folks?
It would be pretty much anyone's waiting on the housing list for each area. So like in Cambridge and Waterloo, it's 10 years, 22 years in Mississauga. So they're understanding that they can't get people into government housing. So they're reaching out to private landlords, hoping that they can work with private landlords into housing these people that probably would be on OW or ODSP. And they also could qualify for the portable housing benefit. And that's something that, you should talk to your tenant about, to talk about the portable housing benefit, because they could potentially get an extra $350 by having that directed towards their rent at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that program sounds interesting for sure. I mean, anything that has a guarantee aspect to it would be something that most landlords would find, beneficial. Because right now, the way things work, I mean, the check just doesn't show up and you don't know why. So if there is a program, I mean, my mediation, I get my spider sense goes off a bit because I've had some bad mediation results from the tribunal where the tenants don't follow through with what has been written down and what has been said. Rarely, in fact, do they ever. It just seems to be another delay tactic. So I'm a little leery on mediation. And mediation is like a negotiation. I mean, how do you negotiate with somebody who has nothing to lose, right? So it's a very difficult situation.
A lot of landlords get the Section 78 put into their agreement, and when a tenant does skip a payment or if they're $1 short, you're supposed to be able to apply to the board to evict them without their consent. But in reality, they get the judgment to say, here's a judgment against you, and they still have that opportunity to apply for a stay. And that's what usually is the delay tactic, especially through COVID and the delay in the backlog of the system. Tenants are falling apart on their agreement, and then they're still able to now wait for another hearing. And you don't even know what's going to happen from that hearing because the adjudicators really don't have any consistency. It all depends what area you're from. Yeah,
I mean, the current situation with the backlog for hearing dates is going to be ridiculous. I mean, I don't even want to fathom when I'm going to get a hearing for this tenant that I need to evict, it appears, unfortunately. So, I mean, in Belleville, in Trenton, we were waiting 4 months to get a hearing. So I dodged a bullet in February. I had a tenant that was behind. They're long-term tenants, but his business went bankrupt and they got behind in arrears in January and February. And well, it went back a little bit further than that, but I don't need to elaborate. But I went to file an L1 in early February on these folks, and I was doing it online. Of course, you have to pay before you do anything. And then I got my date, which was in June. I couldn't believe it was June 18th or something like that. And I filed early February. So I tried to cancel it and get my money back, which was not easy to do. Once they take your money, it doesn't matter what date they give you, you've already paid. So you can get your money. Yeah, you can get your money back if you're not happy with the date. So I rolled the dice because the tenant said they were going to leave, which is rare, right? Because usually in an N4, it says pay or leave, right? Usually they don't pay and usually they don't leave. So, but you're supposed to do one of those, but for some reason they don't, right? So, but these folks, the man, I'll give him credit. He was to his word, and they packed up and they moved out because I fear they would still be there right now, and that's like $1,900 a month.
What was your thought process when you heard Doug Ford telling people if it's about rent or paying for food, pay for food? So pretty much saying it's okay not to pay your rent. Do you think there's a better way of having this situation dealt with versus coming out with that broad statement so early in the pandemic?
Yeah, I remember when I saw that news broadcast and that interview with the premier, and as soon as he said that, I'm like, oh boy, we're in for trouble.
I'm like, no.
Yeah, I know, and I get it, he was in a tough spot. I mean, a global pandemic, okay, unprecedented in recent history. So he's in a tough spot. And I understand what he's saying. If you got to pay for food or rent, pay for your food. The problem is he's stuck, right? Because he says, if you don't pay your rent, don't worry, we got your back. We're going to pay it for you. Well, how many tenants are going to pay their rent? Not very many. Okay, so he's stuck, and I can appreciate that as a business person. I can appreciate the situation he's in. So I was okay with that statement because I knew there was a part 2 coming. There was a B. There was a however. It was going to come in 2 to 3 months, 4 months. That statement from the Premier's office was going to come to help out an industry that provided an essential service to Ontario residents. We housed Canadian Ontario residents who weren't paying rent. We didn't put them on the street so they wouldn't contract a virus that could potentially kill them. We stepped up and they failed us because however, landlords, don't worry. If they don't pay your rent, document it. We got your back. We're going to make it right. Never came.
Even with the overall knowing the backlog, knowing that the Ontario Ombudsman is actively investigating the Landlord Tenant Board based on the delays that have been happening, and knowing what chaos was going to come about it once everything of the eviction ban got lifted. And that's where, later on and through the pandemic, it was, hey, we have $148 million being directed to service managers. We have an additional $150 for service managers. So, is the homeless prevention programs? Is this where the tenants are going to be able to apply for? Are they educating the tenants on these type of programs if they are in a stuck? But no, we actually have these different types of postings on the government websites and their social media stating that your landlord cannot kick you out if you don't have a judgment.
It's shameful. It really is shameful. We're doing our part, and they're going out of their way to make things worse for us. I just can't understand it. And something should have come from the Premier's office, some direct support to landlords, because a lot of landlords can't pay these bills when they're not receiving rent. I mean, I don't know what fantasy world that they're living in that they think that we can just make up money. Poof, there it is. I'll pay the utilities. I'll pay the property taxes. I'll pay the mortgage. I'll pay the upkeep. These are significant expenses when you don't receive money.
Even for a deferral, if you were lucky enough to get a deferral on your rental property mortgage, this could really prevent them from getting future mortgages to keep investing. And we have 50% of this housing stock is provided by small landlords. So when it comes down to a small landlords, and our phone's been ringing off the hook since COVID because of the fact that we have small landlords who are struggling to get these people out, to keep up with their bills. And some of them are even renting because they had to come back to Canada and their house is being occupied and they can't even get access to it. So a lot of things I think really need to be changed. I know Bill 184 is just a step into that area of change. You're definitely trying to protect your tenants there with the different fine structure for tenants. But what's your intake on Bill 184, Darrell?
Well, I compared Bill 184 to that really remarkable document that you and your colleagues put together, recommendations to the LTB and to the RTA. And I was shocked when I read it because, to be honest, there was very little, if anything, in there for a landlord. I mean, and a lot of it was based on, evicting tenants based on occupancy, evicting tenants based on renovations and this kind of thing, and the fines associated with that. And where do they come up with these fines and these numbers for these fines is mind-boggling. $50,000, $25,000. I mean, just for... Anyways, and the timelines that tenants have to apply for, wrongful evictions and stuff like that. And this generally doesn't apply to me anyways, but there was nothing. I was looking for some relief in terms of, my biggest concern is N4, N5s. I want expeditious evictions for N4, N5s. And this, they say, oh, your landlord's, you're in it for yourself. No, we're in it for everybody. If we get timely evictions, I don't have to charge as much as I have to charge for rent. Because right now, we don't know what the game is. We don't know what our cost is. I can't have a business plan with unlimited risk. And that's what we're faced with right now, unlimited risk. We get it coming from every angle.
And that's what we're looking at for our solution for N4. Now we have mediation. It's the volunteer, it's not mandatory. We really need to encourage mandatory mediation for N4 applications. This would be handled by a hearing officer, someone who is going to oversee exactly what the situation is. They're also going to be able to connect those type of tenants who are in a hardship situation to these different type of government services if they are in financial hardship, as a mediator and a hearing officer. And it should be up to the hearing officer to really understand, is this a complicated issue? Should we have this heard by an adjudicator? For an adjudicator being paid $110,000 a year, meanwhile, we could probably get 2 hearing officers for the price of 1. You know, we're gonna bring some business like type of solutions into the landlord and tenant board. And
you're absolutely right. That is a key point that you just hit, because we have a lot of social work minded folks in the landlord tenant board, and we don't have enough business minded folks. And the business is what runs the private housing. I mean, without fundamental sound business practices, you're going to run out of landlords. You're going to run them right out of town. I mean, they just can't deal with the bureaucracy, with the rules, with every angle something's coming at them.
Oh, of course. And the thing is, with the N4 and everything being back into the old age, and we need to say, like, everything's got to be email, guys. We got to send our applications by email. You can review it by email. You can communicate back with by email. And most importantly, you can send us the judgment by email. Our tenants cannot even get a Tim Hortons card on their phone unless they have an email. You can't even pay for your kids' pizza unless you have an email. So everyone email, and this is, I
mean, everybody's pretty capable nowadays. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, my daughter, her phone's never out of her hand, so you can't tell me that young people, you know, are not capable, or anybody's not capable to do this more expeditiously. It's almost like we're in the Stone Ages. And don't get me started on adjudicators in the landlord tenant board, because I've had some bad experiences there. And unfortunately, you know, in my early days as a landlord, I possibly didn't make the best tenant decisions, so I found myself there probably quite frequently. But back in the day, I mean, you didn't have the mass selection of tenants that you could choose from. When I first started, you know, you put an ad in the paper and you might get 4 responses. So you had to choose one of those 4 people. You had to put another $150 ad in the paper, right? But now with Kijiji, it's all free, and you can really, you know, vet your tenants, right? So, but I mean, what drives the simple clerical errors that occur at the landlord tenant board, and they dismiss, you know, evictions based on, you know, you didn't put apartment A when there's 2 apartments, or you spelled the person's name wrong, or your math was wrong. I lost once for $5. I lost. It was over $1,800 in rent, $5. So I don't want to take too long with this story, but everybody's got their stories, like a poker player with his bad beats, right? But anyways, so it was my first time going to the tribunal. I was probably over prepared because I brought all kinds of documentation. It was to my detriment, right? So his rent was $825, and that was on the lease. I didn't realize on the N4, I put his rent was $830. So when it got, and he was 3 months behind, so it was $15 total. So he got to the adjudicator, and he's like, "Sir, you've given me a lease here, shows the rent is $825." And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's correct. Okay, but you showed your N4 is $830. I'm like, uh-oh. Okay, yeah. I can't remember why I did that, but there must have been a reason, sir. But the lease is $825, and I think we adjusted it, but I can't remember. So you know what? I'm happy with $825. The tenant didn't even show up, so the tenant's not even there. So it's just me and the adjudicator, right? And he's like, "Well, sir, you misrepresented your case. You're overcharging rent." And I'm like, "Well, I'm happy with the $825. You can have the $15. In fact, I'll give you $15, right?" And he's just like, "Case dismissed. You know, eviction avoided." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me," right? And then on the drive home, I'm like, "How the hell did I do that? How did I screw up by $5?" And it went through my head. I'm like, the tenant, so it's near the Casey's restaurant. The tenant was taking his garbage and putting it in the dumpster at the Casey's restaurant. So the manager came to me because he knew I owned the house. "Hey, dude, your tenant's putting his garbage in my dumpster. That can't happen because it's city garbage bag tags." And the tenant's like, "Well, I don't have a vehicle. I can't run down and get garbage bag tags all the time. And I got to get rid of this garbage." I said, "To tell you what, I'll give you $60 worth of garbage bag tags, and I'll up your rent $5." And he's like, "Oh, that's good." I couldn't remember that at the tribunal. I lost. Funnier part, I got
that made you lose.
What's that?
It was a nice gesture, and that caused you to lose in court.
No good deed, right? No good deed goes unpunished, right? Well, it gets better. Anyways, I went back to the tenant. I said, dude, you lost. You got 3 days to move. And he bailed. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, I got to try, right? I don't want to go through 3 months of this.
And you know what? We shouldn't have to. We really shouldn't have to kind of do that. And that's another thing that we talk about through our solutions is about minor errors being corrected, you know, being there, and little things like that should be able to be corrected at the landlord and tenant board with the tenant there, or with them not being there, especially for $5, or the spelling of their name or the address in the matter. And that's what I think it's, again, that's a reason to their backlog, you know, throwing these things out that could be corrected right there and then. Now, I don't know, it's just because they want the extra $200. And that's another thing that they've changed, is that we have a $200 application fee and the tenants are at $53. So we're like, listen, I think you really need to start balancing that out a little bit, start looking at other provinces, because other provinces have, you know, application fees are $25, $75, and it's fair for both parties. And the other part that we really need to regurgitate is that sometimes we're feeling forced to always hire that legal representation because they make it so complicated. But when landlords can have the option of having their property managers represent them at the landlord and tenant board, because they know exactly the RTA and the LTB, and they see it from the landlord side and they see it from the tenant side. Like, why are you forcing the landlord to go spend $3,500 now on a non-payment of rent application? Like, this is where they now need to take that cost and pass it on to their tenant. So there's so much that, you know, needs to be fixed. And now we're lucky that the landlord and tenant board is now involved, getting stakeholders involved to talk about their feedback on the proposed changes. And we're going to be covering that on the 27th of August at 8 o'clock. And we have a surprise guest as well. But I want to be able to get your opinion on the recent post that was in the group regarding the protest that was outside of the eviction office in Toronto. There, the tenants were protesting to stop the enforcement officers from going out and doing their evictions.
Yeah, initially I thought this got to be fake news. This just didn't happen. I mean, how would they even be aware of when these folks leave the office and, you know, to put up barricades and whatever they're doing, right? I hope they're wearing their masks though, so they don't get COVID. But it shows you how organized they are. I mean, this is what we're up against. We're not only up against the bureaucracy, we're up against these type of groups. I mean, these rent strike groups, and this is kind of extreme, you know, kind of civil disobedience. But I mean, this is what we are up against. So this needs to be considered. This is we laugh about it, but it's pretty serious.
Mm-hmm. This is something where politics is really heavily involved in the housing industry. And when it comes down to making the proper changes that are needed to better not only the good landlords, the good tenants and taxpayers, the tenant side of it, because they feel that there's more tenants than landlords or even taxpayers who care. So they're almost like playing ball with this, and they want to please the tenants and not lose any kind of votes, because we know it could be potential suicide making the actual changes that are needed in order to create a balanced system and a balanced playing field in order to create the supply. They know it's a supply and demand issue, and they still refuse to do the proper changes that are needed to better the good landlords, the good tenants, and that's it. There's a system that's got to be in place to punish the bad tenants and to punish the bad landlords who try to abuse it. Yeah,
absolutely. And sorry, I forgot the initial part of your point there, but the other thing that I was thinking about was that I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
I was looking at you and I lost my train of thought.
It's usually people popping up on a question or sending the like. It usually gets me off.
Yeah, no, I was thinking deep about what you were saying, and then I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, anyways, go ahead.
Solution for B, because we know right now all landlords across Ontario, they've been very vocal about it, but some of them, you know, are still okay. And for me, I have people who are on the assistance as well. What solution would you like to see change to house people who are on OW or ODSP or any other type of government service for that matter, in order to make it more appealing to want to rent to them? Because right now I tell all our elected officials, we have a lot of people who are we'll call it discriminating against people in the system, but that's because they've already got burned because of someone not paying or damaging the unit, and they have very much of a difficult time trying to evict them.
Yeah, you know, it's a problem. I mean, I personally don't discriminate in that sense. I mean, I'm going to make sure that it's legit and that the check will be coming and stuff like that. But I mean, there's inherent risk. I mean, you can't deny the risk that's associated with this, because worst case scenario, they don't pay, the check gets cut off, they're no longer deemed eligible for a housing allowance, yet they're still in your home. You know what I mean? So you're out thousands of dollars. And this is money that we need. This is money I need to renovate a unit so that, a young family can have a nice kitchen, or I can put a new roof on a unit. I mean, these are things that we need to get done. And the only way to get these things done is with money. So when I think about renting to OW, ODSP, I get a little bit concerned. I really want a track record on this tenant, and why have they moved? Because if they're transient tenants, that's a red flag, right? What I would like to see is that the check continues to come. Now, they want to treat the tenant like an adult, and a lot of tenants, they like to get the money comes to them, right? So I can understand that. They want to be treated as an adult, budget their own lifestyle, pay their own bills. So if they want to do that, I mean, you got to do baby steps, all right? Because these folks obviously have proven that they're not necessarily have the skill set to do that right away. So you need a lot of interaction with their worker. If anybody here is contemplating getting a tenant on ODSP, contact their worker. Even if you don't get a worker's name, contact the office, make personal contact. Just don't expect the check to come and just sit back in the bushes, right? Make personal contact so they know who you are. But anyways, to get back to the point, what I would like to see is the check never stops until the tenant is out. So if
11,
that's or they give us a substantial rent deposit, like 3 months. You know what I mean? So one or the other. I mean, because we're out thousands. So if you want to promote ODSP, ODSP isn't as bad, because that's generally a disability issue, which normally doesn't get stopped because they're deemed ineligible, right? Normally it's long-term disability, which will continue to come as long as they don't redirect the check, right? But OW can be cut off based on earnings, or if, change in lifestyle, you get a partner, they have money, now the check gets cut off because somebody else is living in the unit. So the way it should work is, Darrell, your tenant John at this address is no longer eligible for a housing allowance. The current eviction process is 4 months. 4 months from the date of this letter, you will receive the last rent check. Okay, then it's on me. Right? Then it's in my court. Okay. If he continues to pay his rent, then I'm not going to process the eviction initially. Right. But if he doesn't, then I got 4 months. And if he's paying his rent on the side and they're sending me the check, then I'm going to reimburse them. Right. So, I mean, you gotta do what's right. Right. You got to send the money back. You can't double dip, so to speak. So,
I'm just taking the consideration that we want to work with anybody that's on this assistance, but there's a broken system there as well. And we have to be caring as taxpayers, because even if they're on OW or DSP, we still have people that they're on the waiting list for government housing, and the waiting list is 10 years, 22 in Mississauga. What's happening? What's our shelter system look like? What does our emergency shelter look like because of this? How much money are we dishing out for the emergency shelters? And how much are we using as taxpayers to house people in the hospitals because they can't find a suitable accommodation? And how much are we paying for police services? So they got to see that this is a chain reaction, that it's a domino effect to the overall guidance of the RTA and the LTB. And that's why we really want them to say, and having the landlord and tenant board talk to stakeholders now, we're trying to say, be very careful on what changes you're doing, because with Bill 184 and the RTA the way it is, you guys are like deciding factor of how, if there's more supply coming to this market. And that's the one thing that I like to say about with maintenance. We told them that we almost got like two wheels kind of going here, and you really just need one. So we have tenants going to the landlord and tenant board for maintenance, but they also have the option of going to their property standards. And when they come, they say that I have mold, that property standards coming there looking at for mold, but they're looking at everything else, and they'll make a grocery list for the landlord to say, you need to have it done on this time, on this date. If not, we're going to come in, we're going to do it for your property taxes. So same thing like your licensing for safety mechanisms. Like, there's already systems in place. Stop using it as a cash grab. Start treating your investors in Ontario with more respect so that you can encourage them and provide them with the proper tools in order to keep investing if they can't get their units built fast enough. But if you look at the government building, managing, maintaining, subsidizing, it's like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to be the landlord when you have crazy people like us that want to do it? And that's what Progress said. She's like, I don't know why we're competing with other businesses.
Yeah. Well, and public housing is never the answer. I mean, it's too expensive. I mean, we're taxpayers, so we have a stakeholder in that, and it just can't be done efficiently. So the answer is landlords, for sure. Private landlords, private housing, secondary suites, encouraging investment, encouraging construction, all that to keep up demand. I mean, we have a tremendous amount of immigration in this country. We can't keep up with the demand for housing. So, something needs to give on that front for sure.
I got 2 landlords right now, talking to them this week. We have 2 units that could be put into 4 altogether, and we got another landlord trying to do a conversion to a duplex. And our city of Cambridge is absolutely horrible to deal with, and it's just like the square footage, or they has to have the upstairs has to have a connection inside of the bigger utility room in order to get those permits. Like, you guys are silly. The province wants secondary suites. They put you through the ringer to do it, where they rather not do it, leave it as a single family home, and do not create more supply. So we have a lot to really talk about on another date with just the structuring and really getting ourselves into conversions and trying to create multiple units and what that problem is. So we're going to actually have Denise on Friday. She's going to talk about her experience trying to get a rezoning done and how much of a hard time they're actually giving her. But we're 30-minute time frame here. I love doing it. Everyone seems to like it. Give us your thumbs up in the comments, guys, if you like these Facebook lives and the broadcasts that we do. Darrell, take us away with what was number 1 mistake. What mistake have you made, and what advice can you give the members now so they don't make the same type of mistake?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I made them all, right? But I would say base all your decisions, every decision you make as a landlord, base it on the fact that you never want to go to the LTB, okay? Because that's the only thing you have no control over, all right? So I could talk about pricing, I could talk about your business model, I could talk about tenant screening, I could talk about a lot of different things that are necessary for that. But if you base all your decisions on the fact that I don't want to find myself in front of the LTB, then you're going to have a solid business model and a business plan. You're going to make some money, okay? Because you're going to have good tenants, they're going to pay their rent, and that encompasses everything. If you use that as your foundation of every decision you make, then that's really going to help you. And you're going to have good units too, because the tenant's not going to take you to the LTB for maintenance issues, for reduction in services, for various things like that. So that would be some of the biggest advice. And it's not friends time, okay? These folks, although you have acquaintances and at times very long-term acquaintances, and that you've known them for a long time, but when the wheels fall off, it's not friends time. All right, you got to act fast. If anything, I didn't act fast quickly enough, and it cost me thousands. I listened to the song and dance far too many times. I looked for the good nature in people, and you get bit in the end. And that's why I went to business school, and that's one thing that was never taught to us, is the human nature and not wanting to pay for services that they're automatically getting.
Wow. You said it. Do you see guys why I got them on here tonight? Like, we got that concept. This is a business. This is not a charity. Making sure that you're doing your due diligence. It's better to leave your unit empty for the month to make sure that you're getting that right type of tenant inside of there. Don't rush this. Run with your business mind. Don't run with your heart. And unfortunately, like, we have to run it as our business mind. We can't run it with our heart, because the RTA and the LTB is currently not the way it needs to be in order to make it fair for both landlords and tenants. But through this group and through your posts and your comments that you are putting into this group and your solutions and reaching out to me, you're giving me the information that I need to be able to continue to keep lobbying on behalf of all of the Ontario landlords, the good ones and the good tenants that are out there, and of course the taxpayers. Darrell, I can't thank you enough for being on here tonight. Again, we're going to be on here Friday with Denise, and we have our special guest coming up now on the 27th, and we also have Melissa being squeezed in here too. So if you guys are interested in coming on, telling me your story. This is about not being shy. Tell us what your thought process is on the RTA, LTB, what stories you have, because we need to get our voices out there, and we've been quiet way too long. And I'm glad to see that throughout the years of me advocating for 10 years is that we're getting louder and we're getting more investment groups throughout Ontario. And I think as long as we continue to keep doing this way, we're going to become a united voice that we've always been trying to do. And I look forward to be able to come on here again. And Darrell, thanks so much, bud. I really appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks so much, guys. Happy writing.